government have not been met. And that objective means the complete elimination of the population in Gaza and increasingly the West Bank. This is the same thing that we went through when the Israeli Air Force struck targets in Qatar. And we went through this when the Israelis launched attacks on Iran, and we were theoretically involved in peace negotiations. She has touted privately and publicly. So as long as he controls us through his agents in the United States, and we know who they are, they're very obvious. They have a great deal of money. They've made their power and presence felt here. More buckets of filth and abuse over anyone who disagrees with him. And he needs to understand something. Just because we are heartsick and disgusted by what's happened in Gaza and what's going on in the West Bank too now. Has it gotten worse recently? Yes. Are you going to go in with the B-52s flying wingtip to wingtip and drop, whatever number it is, 8,500-pound bombs and carpet bomb various areas of Nigeria that are inhabited by Muslims?
Well, that you'd have to define to enforce for me, because I don't see that the agreement really has legs until there's some sort of settlement of the Gaza question, and that question has not been settled. Yeah. And the ceasefire is a fiction, and they are continuing to kill Palestinians on a daily basis, and they're actually controlling with each passing week, I think, more of the Gaza Strip. So I think they were supposed to have originally stopped at 52%, then it became 58%, and I imagine they will continue to encroach on what remains. I mean, again, I don't know why anybody thinks that the war in the region or inside Israel itself is over, because the stated objectives of the Israeli government have not been met. And that objective means the complete elimination of the population in Gaza and increasingly the West Bank. The United States has been in on the scam that you mentioned from the very beginning. So the notion that we were somehow another surprised is ridiculous nonsense. This is the same thing that we went through when the Israeli Air Force struck targets in Qatar, and we went through this when the Israelis launched attacks on Iran, and we were theoretically involved in peace negotiations. You know, this is a lot of nonsense. We are absolutely categorically in bed with the Israelis, whether we want to admit it publicly or not. Of course, I mean, to the extent that we can, we simply turn a blind eye to the whole thing. This is nothing new. This has been going on for some time. The consequences for Palestinian women that are imprisoned is no different. You know, we cannot say that there is, I think, Judge, any longer plausible deniability. Well, let's pay tribute to the woman who had the strength of character and the moral turpitude to be in the fight against it. Obviously, it's hopeless. And I think you've talked to many people who are more expert on internal Israeli politics than I am, but I think it's pretty clear that at least 80+% of the Israeli population supports all of the things that are being done to the Palestinians. The level of ingrained hatred is really quite striking. They were declared AMC animals, richly deserving the worst from the very outset. I don't see any evidence that that's changed. I don't see any evidence that that will ever change. No, I think it's true. And of course, one of the things that has always struck me as very odd is, given the accumulation of wealth in the hands of international Jewish capital, seems very strange why some alternative to mass murder and expulsion could not have been found. But I'm not sure that anybody wanted really to find that alternative. I think they wanted to eradicate these people in the worst way possible. Here is a tape. It's several different tapes. It begins with this now: former female major general counsel to the IDF defending herself. It then goes to a newscaster describing what's going on. It then goes to these masked thugs who filmed themselves committing the rape. There's no question but that they did it, and they're masked at this press conference. It then goes to Prime Minister Netanyahu's, whose statement at the end, this is about a minute long, is very, very telling. Chris, cut number 7. The IDF's international legitimacy efforts are greatly benefited by the aura, the protection with which the justice system provides it. Yesterday, the reservist charged with abuse appeared in public and accused Tom Shalomi of spoiling their case. You've done a field trial on us in front of the cameras as if you've already decided who's guilty. We will continue to fight for justice for ourselves, for everyone who came out in uniform and defended our home. This weekend, Tom Shalomi briefly went missing and police found her abandoned car with a note. Police later found her on a beach safe, but in distress. The incident in Stetman caused immense damage to the image of the State of Israel and the IDF to our soldiers. This is perhaps the most severe public relations attack that the State of Israel has experienced since its establishment. Now, just listen to him. Not immense damage to the victim who was sexually assaulted by 3 different men, not immense damage to the moral order, but immense damage to the Israeli image on the international stage. That man has done more to destroy the Israeli image on the international stage than any other human on the planet. Well, 2 things. First of all, he's reminiscent of the thief who was caught stealing from the bank. The thief is very, very remorseful and very sorry. Not because he took the money, but because he was caught. So that's the first part. We understand that. The second part is that, as he's pointed out on numerous occasions, it doesn't make any difference what's said or what's done in terms of reputational issues, because he has absolute control over the government in Washington, which he has touted privately and publicly. So as long as he controls us through his agents in the United States, and we know who they are, they're very obvious. They have a great deal of money. They've made their power and presence felt here. As long as that's the case, and he's going to continue to do whatever he likes, and there's not a great deal that anybody in the United States can do about it, given the control that they exert. Here's one of those agents, a notorious thug himself. He doesn't mention you or me by name, but he does our friend Tucker Carlson, intentionally butchering his name. Chris, cut number 3. And I just want the anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-West crowd to understand something. You're going to have to come through me and millions of people just like me, and you're not going to make it. You think your stupid little podcast is going to change the world like hell it is. Not if I and everybody else have something to say about it. We cancel stuff all the damn time. Hitler admires, Stalin admires, Jew haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them. How about little Adafuentes? We cancel stuff all the damn time. How about Tucker Kataros? What did he do for the country? We cancel stuff all the damn time. Interviews Putin. He interviews the lowest of scum, genocidal maniacs from the face of the earth. They need to be afraid of regular Americans like you and me. They need to be afraid of us. They don't have a lifetime job like a bureaucrat who we're going to protect. And if they're your friend, there's something wrong with you. You don't get to wrap your psychotic, mental, unhinged, Nazi clan jihadist around American patriotism. We're surrounded by cowards who have microphones, who have TV cameras, who have websites, who have columns. Cowards. To Tucker Carlson, I say, did you have a head injury? What happened to you? You platform these people. You deceive your audience. You lie to your audience. You become a full-blown, out-of-the-closet Jew hater. Well, I'm the 10th generation in this country. And I'm sure that, like me, Mr. Levin had relatives who were so committed to the abolition of slavery that they served in the Union Army despite the fact that they were Quakers. I'm sure he has relatives who, like mine, were opposed to the war with Germany in 1917, but nevertheless enlisted and then served as soldiers and officers in the United States Army in the First World War. I'm sure that, like me, he had a father that showed up on Okinawa when he was required to do so and brought soldiers and Marines ashore under fire. I'm sure that, like me, he has friends and other relatives that served in the Korean War and Vietnam and who showed up in 1,991 inches, the desert. So I'm sure that's the case. But unfortunately, he doesn't sound like much of an American nationalist. He sounds more like a Jewish nationalist. And that's his right. He can do that. Although I'm not sure that he should do it in my country, because my country, at least in theory, not always, in fact, we're always willing to admit that, but at least in theory, we've always tried to position ourselves on the side of what we thought was right. And that means we marched into Germany when many of us thought that was a very bad idea, but we did it nonetheless. We felt that it was the morally right thing to do. We stood through the Cold War, even though that was an annoyance, a tremendous expense. It cost us a great deal. In other words, I resent the allegation that anyone who disagrees with him is a coward. I am not a coward. None of my ancestors were. And I'm sick to death of listening to people like him pour buckets of filth and abuse over anyone who disagrees with him. It needs to understand something. Just because we are heartsick and disgusted by what's happened in Gaza and what's going on in the West Bank too now doesn't mean that we hate Jews. On the contrary, this country has opened its arms to Jews throughout our history and given them a place here, and they've enjoyed that place and they have profited from it. So this notion that now, if we are unwilling to support the atrocious behavior of this Israeli Jewish state in the Middle East, he needs to stop and reconsider the wisdom of calling us cowards, of insisting that we don't have the guts to do what is right. I think we do. Well, I don't think they're planning on invading Iran. I think they want to destroy Iran. Now, that also means that we would like to have control of the oil and gas fields. There's no question about that. And I think that's been the goal from the very beginning. And Iran has held out. Now, we've bullied the Arabs in the peninsula into essentially submission, and they have done as we have demanded over many, many years, because, frankly, those governments were dependent upon our military support to stay in power. Iran has refused that bargain. And so the only solution from the standpoint of Washington and London and obviously Israel is to destroy Iran. And I think that is the ultimate goal. And that, again, is why this war is not over. What does the United States gain from either chaos or regime change or destruction of the government or the culture in Iran? You mentioned Venezuela, Colonel. Do you know anybody who is a serious thinker, no matter where they are on the ideological spectrum, who accepts this, I'm giving air quotes, narco-terrorist nonsense as the reason for an enormous military buildup outside of Venezuela? No, it's what you call a cover story. You know, we have to go in because it's the only way to defeat Narot terrorism. Everybody forgets it. For at least the last 30 years, we've had a substantial U.S. Army Special Operations and Special Forces presence in Colombia. We did make progress from time to time. We did assist governments there to essentially pacify, if not suppress, the drug trade. But we don't own it, and we can't afford to take it and own it. And so ultimately, what happens? You fail. You cannot change a society and a state to suit your needs, whatever they are. And that's the problem. We don't seem to want to believe that, and you've got an administration right now with the president who really believes that bullying tactics work, that's how you get what you want. Even though you and I have been talking, and Larry Johnson and Scott Ritter and everybody else now for how long? How many years? We haven't seen any evidence that trying to bully the Russians works. We haven't seen any evidence that we're bullying the Iranians successfully. We're certainly not bullying the Chinese. I mean, does the government just want to steal oil to be blunt in behalf of American oil refiners? It's singing your West Point educated ears. But realistically speaking, is the United States going to destroy the government of Maduro, put in this lady that they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to, who's a puppet of Mossad and the CIA, and she'll concoct some kind of a deal with American oil companies? Well, I don't see any reason why not. That seems to be the goal under the guise of defeating the Narat terrorist state. Can it be done? I think it can probably be done. Now it's like everything else. All of that depends on a powerful U.S. military presence. You know, there's the old joke, it's the military presence that makes things legal. And if we're setting up a new structure with a new government, with new people in charge, the only way they can remain there is for us to remain there. Now, I don't think that's a good long-term solution. And I think over time, if we look at the history of this sort of thing, it tends to breed a lot of hatred, anger inside the country. And that anger is directed ultimately not just to the puppet that we put in, but to us. And you end up with a kind of insurgency. I mean, one of the problems we had in Vietnam, as frankly McNamara later pointed out, we didn't understand we were involved in a civil war, and our influence and backing of South Vietnam against North Vietnam seemed to be logical. But it put us in the unfortunate position of being hated and despised because we were the outsiders. We were the foreigners. It was very clear in 2003, 2004, 2005, that American influence in Iraq wore a U.S. Army uniform and carried a weapon. Colonel, I'm going to ask you in a moment if you think the United States is about to invade Nigeria, of all places. But before I do, here's the President of the United States speaking from his home in Palm Beach, Florida on Halloween, addressing that very issue. Cut number 1. If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. We're going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about and may very well go into that now disgraced country. Guns are blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible, horrible atrocities. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians. These are cherished people. These are great people. Leave them alone. Warning. The Nigerian government better move fast before it's too late. If they don't, there's going to be hell to pay. He's about to host the president of Syria in the White House on Monday, who notoriously has killed and continues to kill Christians and others. Mm-hmm. Well, as somebody in the CIA once told me, well, he's our thug, and so we're backing him. He's our thug. He does what we tell him to do. Therefore, he's treated not as a criminal, but as an ally. Now, let's go back a little bit to Nigeria. Nigeria has a long history of trouble in this particular department. The Christians have always been a minority. They've always been under assault and attack. Has it gotten worse recently? Yes. Are you going to go in with B, 52 seconds, flying wingtip to wingtip and drop, whatever number it is, 8,500-pound bombs and carpet bomb various areas of Nigeria that are inhabited by Muslims because Muslims are currently trying to kill Christians? Is that a good solution? Are you willing to airlift in U.S. forces and then just indiscriminately kill Nigerians that the people who are Christians tell you are their enemies? This is not new, and this is a long-term problem. Is it possible to do business with Nigeria on a different level? Is it possible to sit down with the government and say, look, we really like to do business with you, and we think we can do a lot to assist you, your government, and the Nigerian people, but we'd like you to end this constant prosecution or persecution and killing of the Christian minority. Would that work? I don't know. But it's a lot more reasonable to think in those terms than it is to threaten from thousands of miles away. And in the end, you may do for Nigeria what's already happening for Venezuela. The rest of Latin America is beginning to line up behind and with Venezuela. What will happen in Central Africa, or for that matter, Africa in general? Will they line up and support and stand by Nigeria? In other words, these are what looks from a distance to be a simple problem, rarely ever is, judge. And threatening more death and destruction usually doesn't work very well. Well, one of the problems that we have is that we, and I'm talking about the United States government, has no sense of limitations. I'm sure there are people on the Joint Staff. In fact, I know some on the Army staff who are standing there and saying, wait a minute, we can't be everywhere and do everything, Mr. President. You know what? We cannot fight everywhere all the time. In other words, this 911 force that we decided to be back in 2001 is exhausted. It's worn out. It's not the answer. But there's no sense of limitations. There's no sense that at some point the money press isn't going to work anymore. That the financial system, which is very brittle, is going to break. No one seems to believe that. Now, there are a lot of people out there telling us that's coming, and they've been doing that for a long time. But it doesn't seem to matter to Mr. Trump. Doesn't seem to matter to Congress. I mean, if you look at their fight, it's either a $2 trillion overspending or $3 trillion overspending, depending upon which party you're talking about. There's no sense of limits and limitations on our power, our influence, our resources. And this will do us in this. This will destroy us. So, yeah, I'm sure there are some people that do that. But the people at the very top did not get there by standing up and presenting resistance to dumb ideas. That's not how you get promoted to senior rank. Certainly not in the Army, and I doubt seriously in the other services. As mayor of New York City, and I'm listening to all sorts of people that are having mental breakdowns over this, and nobody steps back and asks, well, why? Is it because he's such a brilliant politician? Is it because he is such an attractive individual, a glittering personality? No, I don't think any of that has much to do with it. They're looking at what's been happening in New York City for years. Here comes someone else. And remember, we've watched 2.5 million people leave New York City over the last several years. I don't know demographically who they were, but I can kind of guess. You think what remains in New York City basically said, we're going to give this man a shot because nothing else seems to work, nobody else changes anything, nothing gets any better. Well, I think that's kind of what you're saying right now. But as long as they can stay in power and they can spend money, the people in Washington will do that because they profit. Their donors profit. Some of their constituents benefit, particularly if there's equipment or technology built in their respective districts and states. But as far as the national interest is concerned, where is the national interest? You know, you want to stand up and say, where's our national interest in Eastern Ukraine? Doesn't exist. Where's our national interest in the Greater Israel Project, expanding Israeli power and hegemony across the Middle East? I don't think we have an interest in that. We have an interest in Israel's survival, in helping it defend itself. We've had that for many years. But we have no interest in bankrolling a war that threatens to destroy the region. And then you go to the Caribbean. Do we have an interest in the Caribbean? Yes, we do. But the question is, how do you pursue that strategic interest? Is invading a country, destroying its government, killing large numbers of people, really a pathway to success? And if you say it is, show us the evidence over the last 80 years since the end of World War II where it has worked. I don't see it, Judge. Shortly before he was murdered, Charlie Kirk said this to Tucker Carlson. It's very simple, two-liners, Colonel. This is yet another distress signal by young people who say, hey, if you're not going to fix our life economically, we're going to get very radical politically. Colonel, 75% of voters under the age of 30 voted for now Mayor-elect Madani. This is very telling. And the Chuck Schumers and whoever's Republican equivalent is John Thun. These folks need to recognize this. Young people profoundly reject the unbridled support of Israel. They profoundly reject the wars. They profoundly reject the continued borrowing. They're going to do something about it, right? You're listening to them and you're saying, yes, you're right. We need another way forward. How do we get it? I mean, you and I have talked about this, and I think we need a third way. And everybody looks at you and says, well, that's impossible, you know, that we're a two-party state. That's the way it is. Nothing else could exist. Well, we've come a long way over the last 80 years in terms of destroying our system. And more important than just destroying it, we've discredited it. And what you just described exemplifies the degree to which it's discredited. It's back to the old thing. You go to the ballot box, you vote, doesn't matter who you elect, you get some version of John McCain